"Sir, this seat isn't for people like you. Please step aside." The words cut through the ambient hum of SkyWings Flight 447 like a blade through silk. Isabella Monroe's voice carried the crisp authority of someone who had spent 15 years deciding who deserved comfort at 30,000 feet. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the cabin's amber lighting, and her modified uniform tailored just enough to accentuate her figure. Without breaking regulations, spoke of someone who understood the power of appearance. She stood blocking the entrance to seat 2, her manicured fingers gripping a tablet like a weapon. Her pearl earrings caught the light as she tilted her head, studying the man before her with the kind of clinical assessment usually reserved for suspicious packages. Marcus Williams looked down at the boarding pass in his hand, then back at Isabella. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing. His simple black polo shirt and dark jeans were understated deliberately so. The only hint of his wealth was the subtle gleam of his watch, a piece that cost more than most people's cars, but looked like something you could buy at any department store. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Marcus asked, his voice calm and measured. 20 years of boardroom negotiations had taught him that the first person to lose their composure usually lost everything else too. Isabella's smile was razor-sharp, all teeth and no warmth. "I said this section is for established passengers, premium customers who—" She paused, letting her eyes travel from his face to his clothes and back again, "who understand the expectations of first-class service." Behind Marcus, the boarding line had backed up. Business travelers shifted impatiently, checking their phones and watches. A woman in a designer suit cleared her throat pointedly. But Marcus didn't move. He stood perfectly still, watching Isabella's face, memorizing the particular way her lip curled when she spoke to him. "I have a first-class ticket," Marcus said, simply holding up his phone. The digital boarding pass clearly showed his name, seat assignment, and the SkyWings Platinum status symbol. Seat 2A, paid in full 3 weeks ago. Isabella barely glanced at the screen. Instead, she tapped her tablet, frowning as if discovering a particularly troubling discrepancy. Technology can be so unreliable, can't it? These apps don't always sync with our actual manifest. I'll need to verify your ticket authenticity before I can allow you to board. Verify how exactly. Please step into the galley area while I contact the gate agent. We've had issues with... She lowered her voice conspiratorially. Fraudulent bookings lately. I'm sure you understand our need for security. Marcus felt the familiar heat creeping up the back of his neck. It was the same feeling he'd had at 12, watching his father be questioned by security at a department store for the crime of shopping while black. The same feeling at 25, when a loan officer had demanded 3 times the usual documentation for his business loan. The same feeling that had driven him to build TechFlow Solutions into a company so successful that banks now courted him instead of questioning him. But today he wasn't here as Marcus Williams, CEO. Today he was testing a theory. For 6 months, his company's employee satisfaction surveys had included anonymous reports of discrimination at various service providers. SkyWings had appeared in 17 separate complaints, all following the same pattern. Black and Hispanic customers questioned, delayed, or downgraded, despite having valid tickets and elite status. The reports were always dismissed as misunderstandings or computer errors. Marcus had decided to see for himself. "Of course," he said, stepping aside with practiced grace. "I'll wait while you sort this out." Isabella's smile widened, satisfied. She gestured toward the galley area like a teacher directing a problem child to the corner. "Thank you for your patience. This shouldn't take long." Marcus moved to the small galley space, noting how Isabella positioned herself between him and the cabin, as if he might bolt for his seat the moment her back was turned. He pulled out his phone and opened the TechFlow executive portal, the secure gateway that controlled the digital infrastructure for half the Fortune 500. Including SkyWings. He scrolled to the client dashboard, finding the familiar SkyWings logo among his company's most critical accounts. Their contract renewal was scheduled for tomorrow, a $2.8 billion deal that would keep SkyWings' booking scheduling and customer management running for the next 5 years. Without TechFlow's servers, SkyWings would be reduced to pencil and paper operations within 48 hours. But that meeting in London felt very far away as he watched Isabella fawn over the next passenger. "Mr. Brooks, welcome aboard." Her voice had transformed completely warm, honey replacing cold steel. "I have your suite ready. Can I get you champagne while you settle in?" Tyler Brooks bounded onto the plane like a golden retriever who'd just been told it was walk time. 22 years old, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never having to worry about being questioned. He wore a designer hoodie that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a smile that had earned him 2 million Instagram followers. Bella Tyler called out using a nickname that made Isabella blush and giggle. "You saved me the good spot, right? Dad said you'd hook me up." "Of course, darling. Seat 2. A just like you requested." Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding. The fraud wasn't random, it was personal. Isabella wasn't just discriminating, she was actively giving away paying customers' seats to her friends. He opened his phone's recording app with one subtle tap, then slipped the device back into his pocket. Every word from this point forward would be documented. Marcus Williams had started TechFlow Solutions in his dorm room at NYT, with nothing but a scholarship, a borrowed laptop, and an unshakable belief that technology should serve everyone equally. 18 years later, his cloud infrastructure company powered the digital backbone of major airlines, banks, and government agencies across 3 continents. The irony wasn't lost on him that the very airline now questioning his right to sit in first class depended entirely on his company's servers to function. Every time a passenger booked a flight, checked in online, or received a boarding pass, they were using TechFlow's technology. Every time Isabella swiped her tablet or checked a manifest, she was accessing his systems. But Marcus hadn't built his empire to lord over others. He'd built it to ensure that kids like him, black, poor, and underestimated, would have doors opened instead of slammed shut. TechFlow's diversity programs had put over 3,000 underrepresented students through college. His hiring practices had made the company 60% minority-owned, with wages that allowed employees to buy homes in neighborhoods their parents could never afford. The SkyWings contract wasn't just business. It was a test of values. If they were treating customers like him this way, what did that say about their corporate culture? What did it say about the kind of partner TechFlow wanted to be? As Marcus waited in the galley, he thought about the reports that had led him here. Keisha Washington, a surgeon flying to a medical conference, bumped from business class and told there must be some mistake with her ticket. Carlos Mendoza, a federal judge, questioned for 10 minutes about whether he could really afford first class. Dr. Amanda Johnson, a university president, asked to provide additional ID because her appearance didn't match the passenger profile. Every story followed the same script Isabella was reading from now: question first, dehumanize, second, gaslight, third. Behind him, Marcus could hear the boarding process continuing. Diego Ramirez, a young Hispanic flight attendant with kind eyes, was helping elderly passengers with their bags. His movements were efficient and respectful, a stark contrast to Isabella's selective courtesy. "Ma'am, let me help you with that carry-on," Diego said to an elderly woman struggling with the overhead bin. "Would you like me to store your medication in the galley refrigerator?" "It'll be easier to access during the flight," Captain James Mitchell's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell. We're showing an on-time departure for London Heathrow. Flight time today will be approximately 7 hours and 15 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure." Isabella glanced at her watch, then at Marcus. For a moment, her confident facade wavered. She'd been stalling for nearly 10 minutes, but the gate agent she'd supposedly contacted hadn't materialized. The plane was full except for the seat she was holding hostage. "Sir," she said, walking over with renewed authority. "I've spoken with the gate, and there appears to be a double booking situation." The system shows 2 passengers assigned to 2A. "Who's the other passenger?" Marcus asked. "Mr. Brooks has priority boarding privileges through our VIP program." Marcus nodded toward Tyler, who was already settling into 2A with a champagne flute in one hand and his phone in the other, filming himself. "What VIP program is?" That Isabella's cheek twitched. "Our Senator's Circle program. Mr. Brooks's uncle serves on the Senate Transportation Committee. We extend courtesy upgrades to congressional families." It was a smooth lie delivered with practiced ease. Marcus almost admired the creativity. But he'd already accessed the SkyWings passenger database through his administrative portal and knew the truth. Tyler Brooks was traveling on an employee guest pass registered to Isabella Monroe. Not only was she giving away paying customers' seats, she was committing federal fraud by falsifying the passenger manifest. "I see," Marcus said. "So where would you like me to sit?" "We have availability in our main cabin, row 37, seat C. It's a very comfortable aisle seat." Another lie. Marcus had seen the seat map. 37C was a middle seat between a crying infant and a passenger whose profile indicated he'd requested a wheelchair for mobility issues. "Row 37, Marcus repeated. "From first class to middle economy. That's quite a downgrade." "Sir, I understand your frustration, but these things happen. We'll certainly note this experience in your file for future preference consideration." Marcus looked at Isabella Monroe's perfectly composed face, her pearl earrings catching the light, her smile never wavering. He thought about his father, who had worked 3 jobs to keep their family housed and fed, who had faced this same dismissive tone from bosses who never bothered to learn his name. He thought about every brilliant student TechFlow had scholarshiped who would face this same moment in their careers, the moment when someone decided they didn't belong. "Of course," Marcus said. "I appreciate you sorting this out." Isabella's smile turned triumphant. She'd won, and they both knew it. "Diego will escort you to your seat. Thank you for your understanding." As Marcus followed Diego down the aisle, he caught glimpses of the other passengers. A Hispanic woman with a press badge hanging from her lanyard looked up from her laptop, her journalist instincts clearly activated by the unusual scene. Her name tag read, Elena Vasquez Travel and Culture Weekly. Several other passengers had their phones out, though Marcus couldn't tell if they were documenting the situation or just killing time. The walk from the front of the plane to row 37 felt like a gauntlet. Business class passengers sipped their pre-flight champagne while Marcus passed with his designer briefcase clearly out of place. Premium economy offered confused glances. Why was someone being escorted backward through the plane? Then they crossed into economy and the temperature seemed to rise 10 degrees. The seats were smaller, the aisle narrower, the overhead bins already stuffed to capacity. Row 37 sat at the very back, near the galley where flight attendants would spend the next 7 hours opening and closing storage compartments. Seat 37C was exactly what Marcus had expected, a middle seat between a mother bouncing a fussing baby and a large man whose wheelchair was being stored below. Marcus was 6'3". His knees would be pressed against the seat in front of him for the entire flight. "Sir, I'm really sorry about this," Diego whispered as Marcus squeezed into the seat. "Isabella sometimes makes questionable decisions about passenger accommodations. If there's anything I can do to make you more comfortable." "You've been very professional," Marcus said, settling his briefcase beneath the seat. "I appreciate your courtesy." Diego hesitated. Are you going to file a complaint? Because if you do, you should know this isn't the first time something like this has happened with her." Marcus looked up at the young man's troubled face. "What would you recommend document everything? Times, names, what was said. And if you can prove discrimination, don't just complain to the airline. Go to the Department of Transportation. This stuff needs to stop." As Diego walked away, Marcus pulled out his laptop. The tiny tray table barely accommodated the machine, but he managed to open the TechFlow portal. His executive dashboard showed all active contracts, including the SkyWings renewal scheduled for tomorrow morning in London. He opened a secure message to his legal team. Need fraud documentation package prepared for federal aviation authorities. Will send details shortly. Also, prepare contract termination notice for SkyWings per clause 14.7, material breach of partnership values. His phone buzzed. Elena Vasquez had somehow gotten his attention and was pointing to her own phone, which showed a Twitter draft. Watching at SkyWings. Force black passenger out of first-class seat he paid for to make room for white social media influencer. This is discrimination, plain and simple. Hashtag airline accountability. Hashtag traveling. While Black Marcus gave her a subtle nod. Elena hit send. The viral storm was about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our boarding process for Flight 447 to London Heathrow, the gate agent announced. We'll start with first class and our Platinum Elite members. Marcus had been watching the gate area for 30 minutes studying the passenger mix and crew interactions. He'd noticed how Isabella Monroe commanded the galley area, directing other flight attendants with the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. He'd watched her greet certain passengers with warm familiarity while barely acknowledging others. Now, as he prepared to board, his phone showed 17 Twitter notifications. Elena Vasquez's tweet was spreading faster than expected, already retweeted by travel bloggers and passenger rights advocates. The airline's social media team hadn't responded yet, but that would change soon. Marcus entered the jet bridge behind an elderly couple debating whether to check their carry-on bags. The tunnel was cramped and warm, filled with the nervous energy of travelers eager to claim their territory in the sky. He could hear conversations in multiple languages, business deals being discussed, vacation plans being finalized. The aircraft door appeared ahead, marked by SkyWings' familiar logo and a welcome mat that read, "Your journey begins here." For Marcus, it felt more like walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," Isabella chirped to the elderly couple ahead of him. "Your seats are right this way. Can I help you with those bags?" Then Marcus stepped through the doorway, and Isabella's expression shifted like a cloud covering the sun. "Boarding pass," she said curtly, not offering any greeting. Marcus held out his phone, showing the digital pass clearly displaying his name, Seat 2A, and Platinum Elite status. Isabella barely glanced at it before frowning and tapping her tablet. "There's a problem," she announced, loud enough for other boarding passengers to hear. "The system is showing a discrepancy with this reservation." What kind of discrepancy, Marcus asked. "It appears this ticket may not be valid. We've had issues with fraudulent bookings purchased with stolen credit cards. I'll need to verify your identity and payment method before allowing you to board." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. In 17 years of business travel through dozens of countries and hundreds of flights, no one had ever questioned whether he'd stolen his ticket. The accusation was so brazen, so obviously discriminatory, that for a moment he was speechless. Behind him, the boarding line began to back up. Business travelers checked their watches and muttered about delays. A man in an expensive suit called out, "Can we move this along? Some of us have connections." "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside while I contact security." Isabella continued, "Ticket fraud is a federal offense, and I can't allow questionable passengers into the cabin until this is resolved." "Questionable passengers," Marcus repeated slowly. "Based on what criteria?" Isabella's smile was poisonous. "Based on my 15 years of experience identifying suspicious booking patterns. People who dress casually for expensive seats often have something to hide." Marcus looked down at his black polo and dark jeans, the same outfit he'd worn to a Fortune 500 board meeting the week before. There was nothing casual about clothes that cost more than Isabella's monthly salary, but he wasn't about to explain his wardrobe choices to someone who'd already made up her mind about him. "I'll wait while you make your call," he said calmly, stepping into the galley area. Isabella's triumph was written across her perfectly made-up face. She'd successfully intimidated him into compliance, proven her authority in front of witnesses, and cleared the way for her real priority. "Tyler," she squealed as a familiar figure bounded down the jet bridge. "You made it. I was starting to worry." Tyler Brooks exploded into the cabin like a burst of champagne, all energy and expensive sportswear. His designer hoodie bore the logo of a brand that charged $500 for distressed cotton, and his sneakers were limited edition collaborations that resold for thousands. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, from his perfect teeth to his casual assumption that the world would rearrange itself for his convenience. Bella Babe Tyler called out, spreading his arms wide. "Dad said you'd take care of me. Please tell me you got me somewhere good. I need to film content for my London series." Isabella practically glowed under his attention. "Of course, darling. I saved 2A just like you asked. The suite has the best lighting for videos. You're an absolute goddess. Dad's going to love hearing how well you treated me." Marcus watched the exchange with growing clarity. This wasn't random discrimination. It was corruption with a smile. Isabella was trading passenger seats for political connections, using her position to curry favor with powerful families while trampling on paying customers' rights. He pulled out his phone and opened the TechFlow administrative portal, navigating to the SkyWings client dashboard. A few keystrokes revealed the passenger manifest for Flight 447, including a detailed breakdown of ticket purchases, passenger status, and boarding privileges. Tyler Brooks, guest pass. Employee sponsor. I, Monroe. Cost $0. Status non-revenue space available. Isabella had bumped a paying first-class customer to accommodate someone flying for free on her personal guest pass. In aviation law, that was fraud. In federal court, it was a felony. Marcus started recording audio on his phone, then slipped it back into his pocket with the microphone exposed. "Isabella," he called out politely, "have you reached security yet?" She turned irritated by the interruption to her flirtation with Tyler. "They're running a background check on your payment method. These things take time when there are red flags. What red flags specifically, I'm not authorized to share details of our security screening process. But you're authorized to publicly accuse me of ticket fraud without evidence." For the first time, Isabella's confidence wavered. Other passengers were starting to pay attention, their phones coming out to record the unusual confrontation. Diego Ramirez paused in his pre-flight preparations, clearly uncomfortable with the situation unfolding in front of him. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice," Isabella hissed. "You're disrupting the boarding process and making other passengers uncomfortable." "I'm making them uncomfortable." Marcus gestured toward Tyler, who was filming himself pretending to be a pilot while sitting in Marcus's seat. "Or is it uncomfortable to watch you give away paying customers' seats to your friends?" Isabella's face flushed red. "That's enough. I'm calling the captain." "Please do," Marcus said. "I'd like to speak with him as well." As Isabella stormed toward the cockpit, her composure finally cracking, Marcus opened his secure messaging app. He found the contact for Sarah Chen, TechFlow's head of legal affairs, and typed, "Need immediate federal aviation fraud documentation. Have evidence of manifest falsification and discriminatory passenger treatment. Prepare termination paperwork for SkyWings contract per breach of values clause. Time sensitive." Elena Vasquez appeared at his elbow, having somehow made her way up from economy. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm Elena Vasquez with Travel and Culture Weekly. Are you comfortable with me documenting this situation? What's happening here looks like textbook discrimination." Marcus nodded. "Document everything. Names, times, exact quotes. The public deserves to know how some airlines treat their customers." Elena's fingers flew across her phone screen, thread. Watching at SkyWings Flight Attendant Isabella Monroe accuse black passenger of ticket fraud. Remove him from first class to make room for white social media influencer Tyler Brooks, nephew of Senator Brooks. This is discrimination happening in real time. Hashtag Airline Accountability. 1/12. She hit send, then immediately began typing the second tweet. The passenger she removed is calm, professional, clearly experienced traveler. The influencer she accommodated is filming TikToks and calling her babe. The contrast is stark and disturbing. 2/12 Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, his face grim. At 52, he'd been flying commercial aircraft for 25 years and had seen every possible passenger conflict. But as he looked at the scene before him, a professionally dressed black man standing calmly in the galley while a white social media star filmed himself in the seat. Something about the situation felt wrong. "Ms. Monroe," he said quietly. "What's the situation here, Captain? I've identified a potentially fraudulent ticket. This gentleman's reservation appears to be compromised, and I've moved him pending security verification." "What specific indicators of fraud did you observe?" Isabella faltered. "Well, the system showed. There were discrepancies in the payment method, and the passenger profile didn't match our typical." "Our typical," what Captain Mitchell asked. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Around them, boarding had completely stopped as passengers strained to hear the conversation. Phone cameras captured every moment, documenting what would soon become the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history. "I need to see both tickets," Captain Mitchell said finally. "The original reservation and the replacement." Marcus handed over his phone showing the confirmed first-class purchase made 3 weeks earlier with his corporate credit card. Captain Mitchell studied it carefully, noting the Platinum Elite status and the substantial fare paid. And Mr. Brooks Tyler looked up from his filming, annoyed at the interruption. "What about me?" Bella said everything was sorted. "Your ticket, please." Tyler reluctantly handed over his phone, revealing the guest pass that clearly showed 0 payment and employee sponsorship. Captain Mitchell's jaw tightened as he read the details. "Ms. Monroe, you bumped a revenue passenger to accommodate a non-paying guest. It's a VIP courtesy upgrade. We do them all the time for important families. Not without authorization you don't, and not by removing paying customers." Marcus watched Captain Mitchell's growing realization with satisfaction. The pilot was clearly a professional who took aviation regulations seriously, and Isabella's fraud was becoming impossible to deny. Sir Captain Mitchell said, turning to Marcus, "I apologize for this situation. Please take your assigned seat in 2A. Mr. Brooks, you'll need to find alternative arrangements." What Tyler's voice cracked like a teenager being grounded. But Bella said, "Ms. Monroe doesn't have authority to reassign revenue seats to guest pass holders," Captain Mitchell said firmly. "That's a violation of federal transportation law." Isabella's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. "Captain, you don't understand the political implications. Senator Brooks specifically requested Senator Brooks can request anything he likes, but he can't supersede DOT regulations or airline policy. Mr. Williams, please take your seat." As Marcus walked back toward first class, Tyler Brooks's whining filled the cabin. "This is bullshit. Do you know who my uncle is? I'm going to get all of you fired, Bella. Tell them who I am." But Isabella Monroe was no longer listening. She was staring at Elena Vasquez's phone, watching the Twitter thread explode across the internet. The first tweet already had 1,200 retweets and was climbing fast. CNN's aviation correspondent had quoted it. The Department of Transportation's official account was asking for details. In the space of 20 minutes, a routine flight had become a public relations nightmare. And Marcus Williams hadn't even revealed who he really was yet. Captain Mitchell's intervention should have ended the drama, but Isabella Monroe wasn't finished. As Marcus approached seat 2A, she positioned herself between him and the chair like a bouncer protecting a VIP section. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "There are security concerns you're not aware of." Marcus paused, watching the desperation creep into Isabella's eyes. She'd built her authority on the assumption that she could intimidate passengers into submission, but Captain Mitchell's support had shattered that illusion. Now she was improvising, and her lies were becoming more elaborate and dangerous. "What security concerns?" Captain Mitchell asked. "This passenger has been exhibiting agitated behavior since boarding." He raised his voice, made threatening statements about making people pay, and I observed him taking photos of crew members without consent. The accusations hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he recognized the strategy when discrimination failed escalate to criminalizing the victim. Paint the calm, professional black man as angry and dangerous. Make his very presence seem threatening. "I've raised my voice exactly once," Marcus said calmly, "to ask why I was being accused of ticket fraud. I haven't threatened anyone or taken unauthorized photos." "That's not how I observed it," Isabella shot back. "And as senior cabin crew, my assessment of passenger behavior takes precedence." Captain Mitchell looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the situation spiraling beyond a simple seating dispute. Airlines took security concerns seriously in the post-9/11 era, and crew members had broad authority to remove passengers deemed threatening. "Mrs. Monroe, did other crew members witness this behavior?" Isabella glanced around nervously. Diego Ramirez was helping passengers in business class, carefully avoiding eye contact. The other flight attendants were busy with pre-flight preparations, having missed most of the confrontation. "I don't need corroboration for security assessments," Isabella said. "Policy gives me discretionary authority over disruptive passengers." Marcus realized with growing alarm where this was heading. Isabella was willing to weaponize federal security protocols to cover up her discrimination. She would rather have him arrested and removed from the plane than admit she'd been wrong. Captain Marcus said quietly, "I'd like to request that all passenger interactions be documented through official channels. If there are security concerns about my behavior, they should be properly logged and investigated." It was a calculated move. Official documentation would require Isabella to file detailed reports, submit evidence, and open herself to federal scrutiny. Most importantly, it would create a paper trail that could expose her pattern of discriminatory behavior. Isabella's face paled. "That won't be necessary. We can resolve this through alternate seating arrangements." "I thought you said I was a security threat," Marcus pressed. "Shouldn't security threats be removed from the aircraft entirely?" The logic trap closed around Isabella like quicksand. She'd overplayed her hand, escalating to security accusations she couldn't back up. Now she had to choose between doubling down on lies that would bring federal investigation or backing down and admitting she'd been wrong. Perhaps she said through gritted teeth, "I misread the situation. The passenger seems calmer now. But given the disruption to boarding, I think it would be best if we found alternative seating to avoid further incidents." Captain Mitchell checked his watch. "We're already 20 minutes behind schedule. What alternative seating?" "We have availability in the main cabin. Row 37C opened up when a passenger missed their connection. Marcus accessed the flight manifest on his phone, confirming what he already suspected. Row 37C hadn't opened up. It had been deliberately held empty as a buffer seat near the galley." Isabella was now planning to banish him to the worst seat on the plane, middle row, back of economy, next to the bathroom and food preparation area. "You want to move a first-class passenger to a middle seat in the last row?" Captain Mitchell asked. "It's temporary. We can work with customer service to provide compensation and upgrade priority on future flights." Elena Vasquez had been following every word from her position near the galley. Her Twitter thread was growing by the minute, each new tweet adding details to the unfolding discrimination update. Flight attendant, now trying to move passenger to middle seat in back row after falsely accusing him of security violations. Captain looking uncomfortable with crew behavior. This is getting worse. 8 out of 12. The passenger remains completely calm and professional while crew escalates. Clear pattern of discriminatory treatment masquerading as policy Airlines need accountability. 9:12. Marcus looked at Captain Mitchell's conflicted face and realized the pilot was caught between operational necessity and moral obligation. Mitchell needed to get the flight moving, and the path of least resistance was to appease Isabella and deal with consequences later. "I'll take the seat," Marcus said quietly. "Row 37. C." "Sir, you don't have to." Captain Mitchell began. "It's fine. I understand the priority is getting this flight moving safely." Isabella's relief was palpable. "Thank you for your understanding. Diego will help you get situated." As Marcus gathered his briefcase and phone, Tyler Brooks called out from seat 2. Hey man, sorry about the mix-up. I'll tag you in my London stories." "Okay, what's your Instagram?" The casual dismissal was the final insult. Tyler genuinely didn't understand what had happened, viewing the entire situation as a minor inconvenience that had worked out in his favor. To him, Marcus was just another passenger who'd gotten bumped, a normal part of air travel that happened to other people. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he followed Diego toward the back of the plane, passing through the cabin classes like descending circles of hell. First-class passengers sipped champagne and barely looked up from their screens. Business-class travelers typed furiously on laptops, too busy to notice the drama. Premium economy offered confused glances. Why was someone walking backward through the plane with obvious expensive luggage? Then they crossed into economy, and the contrast was stark. The seats were smaller, the aisle narrower, the overhead bins stuffed with bulging carry-ons. The air felt warmer and staler, thick with the anxiety of travelers who'd paid too much for too little comfort. Row 37 sat against the back wall of the aircraft, directly in front of the rear galley where flight attendants would spend the next 7 hours clattering dishes and heating meals. To Marcus's left sat Maria Santos, a young mother bouncing a crying baby who'd clearly been struggling with ear pressure during boarding. To his right was Frank Coleman, an elderly man whose wheelchair had been gate-checked and who was already having difficulty with the cramped seating. "Sir, I'm really sorry about this," Diego whispered as Marcus squeezed into the middle seat. "This isn't normal procedure. Isabella sometimes makes decisions that aren't in passengers' best interests." Marcus appreciated the young man's discretion, but he also recognized a potential ally. "How often does this happen?" Diego glanced around nervously before answering. "More than it should, especially with certain passengers. I've tried to report it through proper channels, but Isabella has seniority and political connections." Political connections. Her boyfriend works for the FAA regional office. She brags about having protection for her decisions. Marcus filed that information away as he tried to arrange his 6'3" frame in the narrow seat. His knees pressed against the back of the chair in front of him, and his shoulders overlapped the armrests on both sides. The tiny tray table could barely accommodate his phone, let alone his laptop. But physical discomfort was the least of his concerns. As he opened the TechFlow administrative portal, Marcus began documenting everything: timestamps, names, exact quotes, witness information. Every detail would be crucial for the legal case that was now inevitable. He also opened a secure connection to his company's legal department, copying his general counsel on a detailed message. Documented discrimination incident on SkyWings Flight 447. Have evidence of manifest fraud, federal regulation violations, and pattern of biased passenger treatment. Prepare comprehensive legal response, including DOT complaint, civil rights violation claims, and contract breach documentation. This incident may affect our partnership renewal. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Marcus heard Isabella's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard SkyWings Flight 447 with service to London Heathrow. We apologize for the slight delay and appreciate your patience during our enhanced security screening process." Enhanced security screening. Even in her announcements, Isabella was rewriting history to justify her actions. Marcus looked at his phone and saw Elena's latest tweet. "Plane pushing back now. Discriminated passenger forced into worst seat, while crew pretends everything is normal. Will continue documenting this situation throughout flight. Hashtag Justice. In the skies. 12 of 12. The tweet already had 2,400 retweets and was trending in the aviation category. Local news outlets were picking up the story. Passenger rights advocates were demanding answers, but none of them knew yet that the man in seat 37C controlled the very technology that kept SkyWings flying. That revelation was still to come. The seatbelt sign chimed off as Flight 447 reached cruising altitude, but for Marcus Williams, the ordeal was just beginning. Wedged into seat 37C, he felt every vibration of the aircraft's engines amplified by his proximity to the rear galley where flight attendants were already beginning meal preparations. The crying baby to his left had escalated from fussing to full-scale meltdown. Maria Santos, the young mother, looked exhausted and embarrassed as she bounced her 8-month-old daughter Sophia, who was clearly suffering from ear pressure and general travel stress. "I'm so sorry," Maria whispered to Marcus, her accent thick with Puerto Rican inflection. "She's usually such a good baby, but this is her first flight and the pressure changes." "It's perfectly fine," Marcus assured her and meant it. He remembered his own daughter's first flight at that age, the helpless feeling of wanting to comfort a child who couldn't understand why their world had suddenly become loud and uncomfortable. To his right, Frank Coleman was struggling with different challenges. The 73-year-old retired machinist from Detroit had saved for 2 years to afford this trip to visit his grandson in London, and the cramped seating was aggravating his arthritis and hip replacement recovery. "Used to be airlines treated passengers like human beings," Frank muttered, trying to shift his weight in the narrow seat. "Now they pack us in like cargo and act like we should be grateful for the privilege." Marcus nodded sympathetically while opening his laptop on the barely adequate tray table. The screen's glow illuminated his face in the dimmed cabin as he logged into TechFlow's executive dashboard. But what he saw there made his jaw clench with controlled anger. The SkyWings passenger manifest showed exactly what he'd suspected. Isabella Monroe had systematically manipulated seat assignments throughout the flight. 3 other paying customers had been downgraded to accommodate guest pass holders and personal friends. A black business executive had been moved from business class to premium economy. A Hispanic family with confirmed seats together had been scattered across the cabin to make room for a group of white passengers who'd booked separately but requested adjacent seating. The pattern was undeniable, documented in digital detail, that would hold up in any courtroom. Isabella wasn't just discriminating against him, she was running a discriminatory seat assignment scheme that affected dozens of passengers per flight. Marcus began screenshotting the evidence, building a comprehensive case file that would expose the breadth of SkyWings' customer service failures. But as he worked, his mind drifted to more personal memories. His father, Robert Williams, had worked 3 jobs to support their family nights, cleaning office buildings weekends, doing maintenance at a local college, and occasional day shifts at a grocery store when they needed extra income. Robert had never complained about the work, but Marcus remembered the stories of being questioned by security guards who couldn't believe a black man belonged in the buildings he was hired to clean. "You learn to carry yourself with dignity," his father had told him after a particularly humiliating encounter with a suspicious bank manager. "Don't let them make you angry, because anger is what they expect. Stay calm, stay professional, and let your actions prove who you are." That advice had served Marcus well throughout his career, from his early days as a struggling entrepreneur to his current position as CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. But sitting in seat 37C, knees pressed against the chair in front of him, while Tyler Brooks posted Instagram stories from the first-class suite he'd been bumped for, the advice felt harder to follow. A flight attendant approached not Isabella, but a middle-aged woman named Janet, whose movements suggested she'd been working these aisles for decades. She paused at Marcus's row, taking in the sight of his obviously expensive briefcase and professional appearance in the cramped middle seat. "Sir, can I get you anything to drink? I know this seating situation isn't ideal." Her tone was apologetic without being explicit, a careful acknowledgement that something wasn't right about his placement without directly criticizing crew decisions. "Water would be great. Thank you." As Janet poured his drink, Marcus noticed her glancing at his laptop screen, which displayed the TechFlow logo and complex system dashboards that clearly marked him as someone with significant technical authority. "Are you in technology?" she asked casually. "Information systems consulting," Marcus replied, which was technically accurate if dramatically understated. "My son works in IT, always telling me about cloud computing and server management, says it's the future of everything." Marcus smiled genuinely. "Your son sounds smart. The cloud really is revolutionizing how businesses operate." As Janet moved on to other passengers, Marcus returned to his documentation. He opened his secure messaging app and found the thread with his legal team, which was already active with responses to his earlier message. "Sarah Kim TechFlow's General Counsel received your initial report. Legal team assembling discrimination case file. Need audio/video evidence if available. Also need clarification. Do you want to proceed with SkyWings contract termination?" Marcus stared at that question. Terminating the SkyWings contract would cost his company roughly $50 million in annual revenue, but it would also send a clear message that TechFlow didn't do business with organizations that discriminated against customers. More importantly, it would cripple SkyWings' operations within 48 hours, forcing immediate attention to their cultural problems. Before he could respond, Sophia's crying reached a new crescendo. Maria looked near tears herself, and other passengers were starting to make irritated comments about inconsiderate parents and crying babies ruining the flight. Marcus closed his laptop and turned to Maria. "Is she hungry, or is it the ear pressure?" "I think it's the pressure. I tried feeding her during takeoff like they said, but it didn't help." Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a pack of chewing gum. "This might sound crazy, but if you chew this and then blow gently near her ear, it can help equalize the pressure. My daughter had the same problem when she was little." Maria looked skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything. She unwrapped a piece of gum and began chewing, then leaned close to Sophia's ear and blew softly. Almost immediately, the baby's crying subsided to manageable whimpering. "Oh my God, thank you so much," Maria breathed. "How did you know that would work? Trial and error. Parenthood teaches you all kinds of unexpected problem-solving skills." The simple act of helping with the baby drew Frank Coleman into conversation as well. "You got kids?" the older man asked. "A daughter. She's 16 now, thinks she knows everything." Frank chuckled. "Granddaughter's the same age. They grow up fast, don't they?" For a few minutes, Marcus forgot about the discrimination, the fraud, and the brewing corporate crisis. He was just a father and fellow human being sharing parenting stories with strangers who'd become temporary travel companions. It reminded him why he'd built TechFlow in the first place, to create technology that served people, not the other way around. But the respite was temporary. From the front of the cabin came the sound of laughter and clinking glasses as Tyler Brooks entertained his first-class neighbors with stories about his latest viral video. The contrast was jarring, Marcus providing free childcare advice in a cramped middle seat while Tyler celebrated his fraudulent upgrade with champagne and caviar. Marcus opened his laptop again and began typing a response to his legal team. "Proceed with full discrimination case documentation. Regarding SkyWings contract. Prepare termination notice but don't execute yet. Want to see how they respond to initial complaint before making final decision." As he hit send, Marcus noticed movement in the galley behind him. Isabella Monroe was directing the meal service with her typical authoritarian efficiency, but her movements seemed more agitated than usual. She kept checking her phone and whispering urgently to other flight attendants. Marcus suspected she was starting to see the social media storm building around her actions. Elena Vasquez's Twitter thread had gained momentum throughout the flight, picked up by passenger rights advocates, civil rights organizations, and travel journalists. The hashtag SkyWings discrimination was trending, and videos of the boarding incident were being shared across multiple platforms. But Isabella had no idea yet that her real problem wasn't public relations. It was the man in seat 37C who controlled the technology that kept her airline flying. That revelation was still 2 hours away. Elena Vasquez had covered discrimination stories before, but she'd never witnessed one unfolding in real time. As a travel journalist for Culture Weekly and a contributor to several Hispanic publications, she understood the power of documentation and the importance of amplifying voices that were often ignored. Her Twitter thread about Marcus Williams's treatment had exploded beyond her expectations. What started as a 12-tweet documentation had grown into an ongoing live coverage that was drawing attention from major news outlets and civil rights organizations. Thread Update Hour 2 of flight. Discriminated passenger helping other passengers while crew ignores economy cabin. The contrast with how first class is treated is stark. This man's grace under pressure is remarkable. Hashtag SkyWings discrimination. 13 out of 25, Elena attached a photo she'd carefully taken without showing faces. Marcus helping Maria Santos with her crying baby while Frank Coleman looked on approvingly. The image captured the humanity of the situation, a man who'd been treated as unworthy showing kindness to fellow travelers in economy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Passenger rights advocate Sarah Nelson retweeted with commentary. This is exactly why airline discrimination persists. Victims often respond with dignity, while perpetrators face no consequences. Time for real accountability. CNN's aviation correspondent, Pete Williams, no relation to Marcus, quoted the thread. Following this developing story of alleged discrimination at SkyWings Flight. Journalist at Elena Vasquez providing real-time documentation. Airline has not responded to requests for comment. The story was gaining traction beyond aviation circles. Civil rights organizations were sharing Elena's updates. Hispanic advocacy groups were highlighting the broader pattern of discrimination she'd documented. Travel bloggers were adding their own experiences with similar treatment. But Elena wanted more than viral social media attention. She wanted accountability. As a journalist, she understood the difference between outrage and evidence, between social media storms and legal cases. She opened her laptop and began crafting a more detailed article for immediate publication. Discrimination at 35,000 feet, a first-hand account of airline bias. London bound, on SkyWings. Flight 447. I am witnessing what appears to be textbook racial discrimination playing out in real time. A professionally dressed black passenger who paid full fare for first-class service has been removed from his seat to accommodate a white social media influencer traveling on a free employee guest pass. The incident began during boarding when flight attendant Isabella Monroe questioned the validity of Marcus Williams' ticket, suggesting it might be fraudulent despite clear evidence of his legitimate purchase and elite status with the airline. When challenged about her accusations, Monroe escalated by claiming Williams posed a security threat, a dangerous weaponization of post-9/11 security protocols. Meanwhile, Tyler Brooks' nephew of Senator Robert Brooks was seated in Williams's assigned first-class seat despite traveling on an employee guest pass that cost nothing. The contrast in treatment was impossible to ignore. Monroe questioned Williams' right to be on the plane while greeting Brooks with friendly familiarity and calling him by pet names. What makes this incident particularly disturbing is the pattern it reveals. According to passenger manifest data and crew conversations I've observed, this appears to be part of a broader practice of moving minority passengers to accommodate white passengers, often using fabricated security concerns or computer errors as justification. Williams, to his credit, has responded with remarkable composure. Rather than escalating the confrontation, he has spent the flight helping fellow economy passengers, calming a crying baby, sharing snacks with elderly travelers, and maintaining dignity in the face of obvious injustice. The airline industry has a documented history of discriminatory treatment, from dress code enforcement that disproportionately affects minorities to security screening that profiles passengers based on appearance. This incident suggests those problems persist, despite diversity training and public relations campaigns promising equal treatment. SkyWings has not responded to requests for comment sent via social media and their customer service channels. Their silence speaks volumes about an industry that often addresses discrimination only when forced by media attention and legal action. Elena filed the story with her editors and simultaneously published it on Medium, adding the link to her ongoing Twitter thread. The combination of real-time social media documentation and professional journalism was creating a comprehensive record of the incident that would be difficult for SkyWings to dismiss or explain away. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Williams, who had somehow obtained her contact information. Ms. Vasquez, thank you for your professional documentation of this situation. If you're interested in the broader story, we should talk after we land. This incident is part of a much larger pattern. Elena was intrigued by the phrasing. Marcus Williams seemed to know more about airline discrimination than a typical passenger would, and his calm response to the situation suggested someone with significant experience handling crises. She began researching his background, starting with the name she'd heard Isabella Monroe use during the boarding confrontation. What she found made her reconsider everything about the story she was covering. Marcus Williams wasn't just any passenger. He was the CEO of TechFlow Solutions, one of the largest cloud computing companies in North America. More shocking, TechFlow was SkyWings' primary technology partner, providing the servers and software that ran their booking systems, passenger management, and operational infrastructure. Elena stared at her laptop screen, processing the implications. SkyWings had discriminated against the CEO of the company that kept their planes flying. They'd falsely accused their most critical business partner of ticket fraud and banished him to a middle seat in economy. She immediately began a new thread breaking. The passenger at SkyWings discriminated against is Marcus Williams, CEO of TechFlow Solutions, the company that runs SkyWings computer systems. They literally accused their own technology partner of ticket fraud. This is about to get very interesting. 1/8 TechFlow Solutions provides cloud infrastructure for major airlines, including SkyWings. Without their servers, airlines can't process bookings, check passengers in, or manage flights. This isn't just discrimination, it's monumentally bad business. 2/8 Williams has built his company on values of equality and opportunity. TechFlow is 60% minority-owned and has funded college scholarships for thousands of underrepresented students. The irony of discriminating against him is staggering. 3/8. The revelation transformed the story from simple passenger mistreatment to corporate crisis. Financial news outlets began picking up the angle, noting TechFlow's importance to aviation infrastructure. Stock analysts started commenting on potential impacts to SkyWings operations if their technology partnership was affected. In first class, Tyler Brooks was live-streaming himself eating chocolate-covered strawberries, completely oblivious to the storm building around his fraudulent upgrade. Isabella Monroe was still directing meal service, but Elena noticed her checking her phone more frequently and speaking in urgent whispers to other crew members. Elena's final tweets of the thread struck at the heart of why this story mattered. This incident matters because it shows how discrimination persists even when victims are successful, accomplished, and professionally dressed. If Marcus Williams can be treated this way, imagine what happens to passengers with less power and resources. 7/8 Airlines claim they've addressed bias in their operations, but incidents like this prove those claims are hollow. Real accountability requires consequences, not just apologies after viral videos. We'll see how SkyWings responds. 8 out of 8. As Elena hit send on her final tweet, she noticed Marcus Williams looking at his laptop with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger, it was the kind of focused concentration she'd seen in executives making critical business decisions. Whatever he was planning, Elena suspected the real story was just beginning. Marcus Williams had spent 20 years building TechFlow Solutions on a foundation of meritocracy and technological excellence. His company's servers processed billions of transactions daily for clients ranging from Fortune 500 corporations to government agencies, and the responsibility of that trust weighed on him constantly. Which was why accessing SkyWings' internal systems felt both necessary and troubling. As CEO of their technology partner, he had administrative access to their infrastructure access that was meant for technical support and system maintenance, not personal investigation. But Isabella Monroe's fraud and discrimination had crossed lines that demanded documentation. Marcus opened a secure terminal window and entered his executive credentials. The SkyWings operational dashboard appeared, showing real-time data from hundreds of flights, thousands of passenger records, and detailed audit logs of every system interaction. He navigated to Flight 447's passenger manifest, which told a story more damning than he'd imagined. Isabella Monroe hadn't just discriminated against him. She'd been running a systematic scheme of seat manipulation for months. The data was devastating. 47 instances in the past 6 months where paying passengers were downgraded to accommodate guest pass holders. 63 cases where minority passengers were moved from premium seats to economy using false computer error justifications. Over 200 security flags filed against Black and Hispanic passengers, with 97% later determined to be unfounded by airport security. A pattern of guest pass abuse that cost SkyWings an estimated $2.3 million in lost revenue. But the most shocking discovery was in Isabella's personal access logs. She'd been using her crew credentials to access passenger profiles before flights, specifically targeting minority customers for random additional screening and seat changes. She'd flagged Marcus Williams's reservation 3 days ago, planning the discrimination before he'd even arrived at the airport. Marcus began documenting everything, creating an encrypted backup of the evidence that would be crucial for both legal proceedings and regulatory investigations. Every screenshot was time-stamped and digitally signed through TechFlow's secure protocols. His investigation was interrupted by Sophia's crying, which had resumed despite Maria's best efforts. The baby's distress was drawing irritated comments from surrounding passengers, and Maria was beginning to look overwhelmed. "Is there anything else I can try?" Maria asked desperately. She was fine during the first part of the flight. Marcus saved his work and turned his attention to the immediate problem. Sometimes they need more than just pressure relief. "Mind if I try something?" He opened his briefcase and pulled out a small tablet loaded with children's apps, a leftover from business trips when his daughter was younger. He found a simple color-changing animation with gentle music and held it where Sophia could see the screen. The effect was almost immediate. Sophia's crying subsided as she became fascinated by the moving shapes and soft sounds. Maria looked ready to cry with relief. "You're a lifesaver," she whispered. "How did you know to do that?" "Experience and desperation." Marcus smiled. "Parenthood teaches you to try everything until something works." Frank Coleman chuckled from the window seat. "Wish they'd had those gadgets when my kids were little." We had to make do with car keys and our imagination. The simple act of helping with Sophia reminded Marcus why this fight mattered. It wasn't just about his personal treatment. It was about the kind of world he wanted for his daughter, for Sophia, for every child who would grow up flying on airplanes where they might be judged by their appearance rather than their humanity. Marcus returned to his investigation with renewed focus. He opened SkyWings' financial systems, which TechFlow also managed, and began analyzing the cost of Isabella's discrimination scheme. The numbers were staggering. Lost revenue from fraudulent downgrades, $2.3 million. Customer service costs for discrimination complaints, $890,000. Legal settlements for previous incidents, $1.7 million. Operational inefficiencies from manual seat reassignments, $450,000. Isabella Monroe's personal bias was costing SkyWings over $5 million annually, and that didn't include the immeasurable damage to their reputation and customer loyalty. Marcus opened a secure communication channel to his executive team at TechFlow headquarters in Austin. His message was brief, but loaded with implications, team. Currently experiencing severe customer service failure by SkyWings that may affect our partnership renewal. Documenting systematic discrimination practices that violate our company values clause. Need legal PR and technical teams on standby for potential contract termination and system migration. Will update upon landing. The response from Sarah Kim, his general counsel, came within minutes. Marcus, are you saying they discriminated against you on a flight where you're traveling to sign their renewal? Please tell me you're joking. No joke. Have documented evidence of fraud, systematic bias, and federal regulation violations. They moved me to middle seat in economy to accommodate employee guest pass holder. Currently gathering additional evidence through our administrative access. Holy shit. Sorry for language, but holy shit. Do you want me to start drafting the termination papers? Marcus paused before responding. Terminating the SkyWings contract would cost TechFlow about $50 million annually, but it would also send an unmistakable message about his company's values. More importantly, it would force SkyWings to confront their discrimination problem or face operational collapse. Draft everything, but don't execute yet. Want to see how they respond when they realize who they've been discriminating against. Marcus closed the communication and returned to his evidence gathering. He was building a case that would be impossible for SkyWings to dismiss, defend, or explain away. Every discriminatory act was documented in their own systems. Every policy violation was logged in audit trails that couldn't be altered or deleted. But as he worked, Marcus became aware of increasing activity in the galley behind him. Flight attendants were whispering urgently, and he caught fragments of conversation about social media and trending hashtags and corporate is freaking out. Isabella Monroe appeared in the aisle, her earlier confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. She was checking her phone constantly and speaking in hushed, urgent tones to her crew. Marcus closed his laptop and settled back in his cramped seat, helping Maria entertain Sophia, while Frank shared stories about his grandson in London. To anyone watching, he appeared to be just another passenger making the best of an uncomfortable situation. He had no intention of revealing his identity until they landed. The real confrontation would happen on the ground, where SkyWings would have to choose between accountability and destruction. The galley area behind row 37 had become a command center of whispered conversations and barely concealed panic. Isabella Monroe huddled with Janet Phillips and Robert Cruz, two senior flight attendants who'd watched her boarding performance with growing unease. "The hashtag is trending worldwide," Isabella hissed, showing them her phone screen. Hashtag SkyWings discrimination has 50,000 tweets and climbing. Corporate is sending emergency messages every 15 minutes. Janet, who'd been flying for SkyWings for 18 years, shook her head grimly. "I tried to tell you this would happen eventually. You can't keep playing favorites and moving passengers around like chess pieces." "Don't lecture me," Isabella snapped. "I've been managing this cabin for 15 years. I know how to handle problem passengers." Problem passengers. Robert's voice carried the incredulity of someone watching a colleague's career self-destruct. "That man in 37C has been nothing but polite. He's helping other passengers, keeping quiet, not causing any trouble. Meanwhile, your boyfriend in first class is live-streaming himself eating caviar." Isabella's face flushed red. "Tyler isn't my boyfriend. He's an important passenger with political connections. He's a social media brat flying on your guest pass," Janet said bluntly. "And now the whole world knows about it because some journalist in economy decided to document the entire incident." In seat 37, C. Marcus could hear fragments of their conversation despite their attempts at discretion. The crew's growing panic suggested that SkyWings' corporate headquarters was beginning to understand the magnitude of their public relations disaster. Marcus opened his laptop again and checked the latest social media coverage. Elena Vasquez's revelation about his identity as TechFlow's CEO had transformed the story from simple discrimination to corporate crisis. Financial news outlets were speculating about potential impacts on SkyWings' technology infrastructure. Aviation analysts were questioning the airline's decision-making processes. Most damaging were the personal accounts from other passengers who'd witnessed similar treatment. Elena's story had opened floodgates of discrimination reports, with hundreds of people sharing their own experiences of bias on SkyWings flights. The pattern was undeniable. Minority passengers routinely questioned, downgraded, or removed to accommodate white passengers. A new Twitter thread from an aviation lawyer caught Marcus's attention. Reading about at SkyWings' discrimination incident. As someone who represents airline employees, I can tell you this violates multiple federal regulations. 1. DOT, anti-discrimination rules. 2. Aviation security protocols. 3. Passenger rights statutes, 1/12. Falsely accusing passenger of ticket fraud without evidence is defamation. Using security concerns to justify discriminatory treatment weaponizes federal protocols. Moving paying customers for non-revenue guests is commercial fraud. This is a legal nightmare. 2/12 Marcus screenshotted the thread for his legal team's reference. The case against SkyWings was building itself through public documentation and expert analysis. But the immediate tension was happening right behind him, where Isabella's authority was crumbling under crew pressure. "What do you want me to do?" Isabella demanded. "Grovel to some passenger because a few people on Twitter are overreacting? I want you to think about the rest of us," Diego Ramirez said, joining the conversation from where he'd been serving beverages in business class. "When this blows up, and it will blow up, we're all going to face questions about why we didn't report your behavior." "Report me for what?" "Managing my cabin for systematic discrimination," Diego said quietly. "I've been documenting incidents for months, waiting for someone in authority to care. Today, I watched you commit federal fraud in front of witnesses, and I'm not going to pretend it was normal procedure." The admission hit Isabella like a physical blow. Diego had been building his own case against her, collecting evidence of her discriminatory practices. Combined with Marcus's technical documentation and Elena's journalistic coverage, her exposure was becoming comprehensive. "You've been spying on me." Isabella's voice rose enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. "I've been doing my job," Diego replied, "which includes ensuring all passengers receive equal treatment regardless of their race or appearance." Captain Mitchell's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please report to stations for final service preparation. We'll be beginning our descent into Heathrow in approximately 90 minutes. The announcement broke up the galley confrontation, but the tension remained. Isabella retreated to first class to fawn over Tyler Brooks, who was still filming content for his social media channels. Janet and Robert exchanged worried glances before returning to their duties. Diego lingered in economy, checking on passengers with obvious care for their comfort. Marcus watched the crew dynamics with growing understanding. Isabella's discrimination wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was enabled by a system that prioritized authority over accountability, that allowed senior crew members to abuse their power without meaningful oversight. But it was also being documented by employees like Diego, who understood the difference between service and servitude, between professional authority and personal prejudice. Marcus opened a new message to his legal team. Additional evidence: crew member willing to testify about pattern of discrimination. Also have audio recordings of crew acknowledging fraudulent seat assignments. Cases becoming stronger by the hour. Sarah Kim's response was immediate. "Marcus, we need to discuss strategy. This is going beyond passenger complaint into potential RICO territory if there's organized fraud. Are you sure you want to go this route? Marcus looked around the cramped economy cabin at Maria, bouncing Sophia at Frank, adjusting his position to relieve arthritic pain at the dozens of other passengers who were paying full fare for substandard treatment, while Tyler Brooks enjoyed champagne and caviar in a seat obtained through fraud. He typed back, "I'm sure. Some things matter more than money." But even as he wrote those words, Marcus knew the financial implications would be severe for SkyWings. In less than 2 hours, they would learn that discriminating against Marcus Williams wasn't just morally wrong, it was the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history. Elena Vasquez had covered viral stories before, but she'd never been at the center of one that was growing this rapidly. Her initial Twitter thread about Marcus Williams had exploded into a global conversation about airline discrimination, corporate accountability, and the power of real-time documentation. The numbers were staggering. #SkyWings. Discrimination was trending in 12 countries. Her original thread had been retweeted over 100,000 times. Major news outlets were reaching out for interviews. Civil rights organizations were using her documentation to call for federal investigations. But more importantly, her revelation about Marcus Williams's identity as TechFlow's CEO had transformed a passenger rights story into a business catastrophe. Financial markets were reacting in real time to the unfolding crisis. Elena refreshed her stock tracking app and watched SkyWings' share price drop in increments that represented millions of dollars in lost market value. Down 4% in the first hour after her CEO revelation. Down 8% as business journalists picked up the story. Down 12% as aviation analysts began speculating about TechFlow contract implications. She opened a new Twitter thread to document the escalating crisis. Thread hour 3 of #SkyWings discrimination. Stock down 12% as markets react to news that Airline discriminated against CEO of their technology partner. This is unprecedented corporate self-destruction happening in real time. 1/15 financial analysts are questioning how SkyWings can maintain operations if at TechFlow Systems terminates their partnership. The company provides critical infrastructure booking systems, passenger databases, flight scheduling. Without them, SkyWings goes offline. 2/15. Elena attached a screenshot of a Bloomberg terminal showing SkyWings' plummeting stock price alongside TechFlow's steady performance. The visual contrast told the story more powerfully than words, one company destroying itself while the other remained unaffected. The story was attracting attention from unexpected quarters. Senator Elizabeth Warren's office issued a statement calling for DOT investigation of airline discrimination practices. The NAACP announced they were monitoring the situation for potential civil rights violations. Hispanic advocacy groups highlighted the broader pattern of bias Elena had documented. But the most surprising response came from other airline employees who began sharing their own experiences with discriminatory policies and pressure to profile passengers based on appearance. At Flight Attendant, 20 years. Working for different carrier but have seen this exact behavior. Crew members who discriminate often protected by seniority systems and union contracts. Takes courage to report. Glad at Elena Vasquez documented this. At Pilot Speaks, Truth Been Flying commercial for 15 years. Discrimination happens more than public realizes, usually covered up with policy excuses or computer errors. Time for industry accountability. At Airline Worker Union, our members report increasing pressure to manage passenger demographics for customer comfort. This is coded language for discrimination, and it needs to stop. The industry insider accounts gave Elena's reporting additional credibility while highlighting the wider scope of the problem. This wasn't just about Isabella Monroe or SkyWings. It was about institutional practices that enabled discrimination across the aviation industry. Elena's phone buzzed with a direct message from Marcus Williams. Ms. Vasquez, your documentation has been invaluable. When we land, I'd like to share additional information that will complete your story. What you've witnessed today is part of a much larger pattern that needs public exposure. Elena was intrigued by Marcus's measured tone and obvious familiarity with media relations. Most passengers facing discrimination would be emotional, angry, or seeking immediate vindication. Marcus seemed to be orchestrating a careful campaign with specific strategic objectives. She responded, Mr. Williams, I'd be honored to continue covering this story. Your calm response to obvious injustice has been remarkable. What additional information can you share? Not over messages, but I can tell you that my company has documented evidence of systematic discrimination affecting thousands of passengers. Today's incident was the final proof we needed. Elena felt her investigative instincts activate. Marcus wasn't just a victim. He was someone with access to data that could expose industry-wide problems. This story was becoming bigger than she'd imagined. She began crafting a new article for immediate publication, this one focusing on the business implications of the crisis. How airline discrimination became a $500 million mistake. The SkyWings crisis explained. What began as routine passenger mistreatment has evolved into the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history. SkyWings' discrimination against TechFlow CEO Marcus Williams has cost the airline over $500 million in market value in less than 4 hours. The financial carnage reflects investor panic about operational continuity. TechFlow provides the cloud infrastructure that keeps SkyWings functioning, from booking systems to passenger databases to flight scheduling. Without this partnership, SkyWings would be reduced to manual operations that haven't been used since the 1990s. Industry analysts are questioning how airline executives allowed frontline discrimination to threaten critical business relationships. The incident reveals dangerous disconnects between corporate diversity policies and operational practices. This is what happens when discrimination becomes institutionalized, said Dr. Sarah Johnson, a business ethics professor at Harvard. Companies can't compartmentalize bias and expect it won't affect their bottom line. Eventually it catches up with them. The broader implications extend beyond SkyWings. If discrimination is endemic in airline operations, as passenger reports suggest, the industry faces potential regulatory crackdowns and class action lawsuits that could reshape aviation practices. SkyWings has not responded to multiple requests for comment. Their silence, combined with continued stock decline, suggests a company in crisis with no clear strategy for damage control. Elena published the article and shared it across her social media platforms. The business angle was attracting new audiences, investors, industry executives, and policymakers who might not care about passenger rights but certainly cared about market stability and corporate governance. As she worked, Elena noticed increasing agitation in the first-class cabin. Through the partially drawn curtain, she could see Isabella Monroe in urgent conversation with other crew members. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Tyler Brooks continued filming himself, oblivious to the crisis swirling around his fraudulent upgrade. The contrast was stark, the perpetrators of discrimination panicking, while their victim calmly helped fellow passengers in economy. Elena documented this irony in her ongoing Twitter coverage, highlighting how grace under pressure had become Marcus Williams's most powerful weapon. But Elena suspected the real confrontation was yet to come. Marcus Williams had been building towards something during the entire flight, collecting evidence and documenting violations with the methodical precision of someone planning a comprehensive response. When they landed at Heathrow, the world would learn just how expensive discriminating against the wrong person could be. The executive conference room at SkyWings headquarters in Atlanta felt like a war room under siege. CEO Robert Thornfield paced the length of the mahogany table while his senior staff hunched over laptops and phones, watching their company's reputation disintegrate in real time. Stocks down 18% and falling CFO, Patricia Nash announced, her voice strained. We've lost over $600 million in market cap in the last 4 hours. The trending hashtag has 2 million mentions. Added PR Director Michael Santos, scrolling through his crisis monitoring dashboard. CNN, MS, NBC, Fox, they're all covering it. The Washington Post is running a front-page story for tomorrow's print edition. And we still can't reach Flight 447, Thornfield asked. Satellite communications are working, but the crew isn't responding to corporate messages, Operations Director Linda Hayes replied. Captain Mitchell acknowledged routine position reports, but any questions about the passenger incident get radio silence. Thornfield stopped pacing and stared at the wall-mounted monitors showing news coverage of the crisis. Every screen displayed variations of the same humiliating story his airline had discriminated against the CEO of their most critical technology partner. "Explain to me again how this happened," he said quietly. Nash pulled up the passenger manifest on her tablet. Marcus Williams booked first-class seat 2A 3 weeks ago. Paid full fare, has Platinum Elite status. Senior flight attendant Isabella Monroe moved him to 37C during boarding to accommodate Tyler Brooks, who was traveling on an employee guest pass. "An employee guest pass," Thornfield repeated. "She bumped a paying customer for someone flying free." "It gets worse," Santos added. "Tyler Brooks is Senator Robert Brooks's nephew. There's speculation that Monroe was trying to curry political favor, possibly for personal benefit, and Monroe accused Williams of ticket fraud. According to passenger documentation on social media, yes, she suggested his ticket might be stolen and his behavior was suspicious." Thornfield felt a migraine building behind his eyes. In 30 years of airline management, he'd seen every possible crisis: crashes, labor strikes, terrorist threats, pandemic shutdowns. But he'd never seen a company destroy itself through sheer discrimination stupidity in real time. "What's TechFlow's position?" he asked. General Counsel David Park spoke up from the far end of the table. "Radio silence. Their legal team isn't returning calls. Their PR department says no comment at this time. Williams himself is obviously still on the flight. When do they land?" 90 minutes, Hayes said, checking the flight tracker. "But Robert, we need to discuss contingency planning. If TechFlow terminates our contract," she didn't need to finish. Everyone in the room understood the implications. TechFlow managed SkyWings' entire digital infrastructure, passenger booking systems, flight scheduling software, crew management databases, maintenance records, financial processing. Losing their partnership would cripple operations within 48 hours. "What would it take to replace TechFlow?" Thornfield asked. 6 to 12 months, minimum, IT Director James Chen replied. "That's if we could find another provider with equivalent capacity, which is unlikely. TechFlow is the industry leader for a reason. And the cost. Triple our current contract, assuming anyone would take us on as a client under these circumstances." Nash pulled up financial projections on her laptop. "If we lose TechFlow, we're looking at operational shutdown within a week. The cost of rebuilding our technology infrastructure would exceed our cash reserves. We'd be looking at bankruptcy protection." The room fell silent as the magnitude of the crisis sank in. They weren't just facing public relations embarrassment or regulatory fines. They were facing existential threat to the company's survival. Thornfield's phone buzzed with a text from his board chairman. "Emergency board meeting called for 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Expect difficult questions about risk management and corporate governance. Stock down 22%. This is catastrophic." Options, Thornfield asked his team. Public apology, Santos suggested. Full accountability, immediate firing of responsible employees, comprehensive policy changes. Legal settlement, Park added. Whatever Williams wants within reason. Contract renegotiation, Nash said. Give TechFlow better terms to stay. All of the above, Hayes concluded. "And pray it's enough," Thornfield looked at the monitoring screen showing Elena Vasquez's latest Twitter update 1 hour until landing. SkyWings stock in free fall while passengers document ongoing discrimination. This crisis is far from over. Get me everything we have on Isabella Monroe, Thornfield ordered. Employment history, performance reviews, previous complaints. I want to know how someone with this kind of judgment was put in charge of customer-facing operations. HR Director Susan Martinez pulled up Monroe's file. 15 years with the company, promoted to senior flight attendant 5 years ago. Multiple commendations for professional appearance and cabin management. Complaints. 17 passenger complaints in the last 2 years. All dismissed as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. What kind of complaints? Martinez scrolled through the file. Mostly allegations of discriminatory treatment, Black and Hispanic passengers claiming they were questioned more extensively than white passengers, moved from premium seats without justification, subjected to additional screening. And they were all dismissed. Crew supervisors determined they were isolated incidents without pattern of bias. Thornfield felt sick. They'd had warnings for years that Monroe was discriminating against passengers and management had ignored them. Worse, they'd actively protected her while dismissing victims' complaints. We're not just dealing with one incident, he realized aloud. We're dealing with systematic discrimination that we enabled through willful ignorance. The legal exposure is enormous, Park confirmed. If Williams's legal team discovers our complaint history, they can argue institutional knowledge and deliberate indifference. That opens us to civil rights violations, punitive damages, federal intervention. Santos looked up from his phone. It gets worse. Other passengers are sharing their stories with hashtag SkyWings discrimination. We're looking at potential class action territory. The monitors around the room showed the spreading damage stock price in freefall news coverage, intensifying social media outrage, growing industry competitors distancing themselves from SkyWings practices. How did we not see this coming? Thornfield asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. They'd built a corporate culture that prioritized operational efficiency over human dignity, that protected employee authority over passenger rights, that dismissed discrimination complaints as public relations problems rather than moral failures. Now they were facing the consequences, a company hemorrhaging hundreds of millions in value while their most critical business partner flew toward London in a middle seat documenting everything for what was surely going to be the lawsuit of the century. Flight 447 was still an hour from landing, but SkyWings was already crashing. Captain James Mitchell had been flying commercial aircraft for 25 years, long enough to know when his crew was in crisis. The frantic messages from corporate headquarters, the unusual passenger manifest discrepancies, and Isabella Monroe's increasingly erratic behavior all pointed to a situation spiraling out of control. As Flight 447 began its descent into London Heathrow, Mitchell made a decision that would define the final act of this airborne drama. Isabella, report to the cockpit immediately, he announced over the crew intercom. Isabella Monroe appeared in the cockpit doorway moments later, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Her perfectly styled hair showed signs of stress, and her hands trembled slightly as she closed the door behind her. "Captain, what can I sit down?" Mitchell commanded. "We need to discuss the passenger situation before we land." Isabella perched on the jump seat, her polished exterior cracking under pressure. "If this is about the seating arrangements, I followed proper protocol for security concerns." "Security concerns?" Mitchell pulled up the passenger manifest on his tablet. "You're telling me Marcus Williams posed a security threat?" He exhibited agitated behavior, made threatening statements. "Stop!" Mitchell's voice cut through her fabrications like a blade. "I've been in contact with headquarters for the past hour. Do you know what they told me?" Isabella shook her head, her face pale. "They told me that Marcus Williams is the CEO of TechFlow Solutions, the company that runs our booking systems, our passenger databases, our operational software. The man you accused of ticket fraud is our most critical business partner." The blood drained from Isabella's face so quickly that Mitchell thought she might faint. Her mouth opened and closed silently as the magnitude of her mistake became clear. "You discriminated against the CEO of the company that keeps this airline flying," Mitchell continued relentlessly. "You falsely accused him of fraud, forced him into economy, and gave his seat to someone traveling on your personal guest pass." I didn't know who he was," Isabella whispered. "That's exactly the problem," Mitchell said. "You didn't know who he was, so you assumed he didn't belong in first class. You looked at a successful black businessman and decided he must be a criminal." Isabella tried to mount a defense. "It was a computer error. The system showed double booking. The system shows no such thing. I've reviewed the manifest. Williams paid full fare 3 weeks ago. Tyler Brooks is listed as traveling on employee guest pass I. Monroe. You committed fraud, Isabella." The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Isabella's career. Her 15-year climb through airline hierarchy. Her carefully constructed authority. All of it crumbled in the space of a single conversation. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Now we land, and you face the consequences. Corporate has already initiated termination procedures. Airport police will be waiting to escort you for questioning about federal aviation violations." "James." "Please, Captain Mitchell," he corrected coldly. "And there's nothing I can do. You've created the biggest customer service disaster in airline history. Our stock is down 25%. We might lose our technology contract. This company might not survive what you did today." As Isabella left the cockpit, her professional life effectively over Mitchell opened a secure communication channel to SkyWings headquarters. "Atlanta Control, this is Mitchell on 447, approaching Heathrow. What's the corporate response status? 447, this is Crisis Management. CEO Thornfield wants to speak directly with passenger Williams upon landing. Legal team standing by. Stock down 28% and falling. This is code red. Understood. What's the passenger's condition?" According to social media monitoring, he's been helping other economy passengers throughout the flight. Journalist on board says he's shown remarkable composure despite obvious discrimination. Mitchell shook his head in disbelief. They'd humiliated their most important partner, and he'd spent the flight demonstrating exactly the kind of grace and professionalism that made successful business relationships possible. Any word from TechFlow corporate radio silence. Their legal team isn't taking calls. Williams holds complete authority over the partnership. If he decides to terminate, we're looking at operational shutdown within 48 hours. As Flight 447 descended through London's cloudy skies toward Heathrow, Mitchell realized he was piloting more than an aircraft. He was delivering a reckoning that would reshape his company forever. In seat 37, C. Marcus Williams closed his laptop and prepared for landing. He'd spent the flight documenting everything: Isabella's discriminatory statements, the fraudulent seat assignments, the pattern of bias affecting multiple passengers. His legal team had comprehensive evidence for federal civil rights complaints, aviation fraud charges, and corporate accountability lawsuits. But more importantly, he'd made a decision about TechFlow's partnership with SkyWings. Some relationships couldn't be repaired with apologies and compensation. Some betrayals revealed character flaws too fundamental to overlook. As the plane touched down at Heathrow, Marcus Williams wasn't just another passenger completing a journey. He was a CEO about to deliver consequences that would redefine accountability in the aviation industry. The reckoning had arrived. The wheels of Flight 447 had barely touched the Heathrow tarmac when Marcus Williams opened his laptop for the final time during the journey that would reshape aviation industry accountability. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, he initiated the sequence of commands that would transform personal discrimination into corporate catastrophe. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the precision of someone who had built a technology empire from dormitory room beginnings. Each keystroke was calculated, each command deliberate. This wasn't revenge. It was justice delivered through digital infrastructure. Marcus opened TechFlow's executive control panel, the secure interface that managed cloud services for Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and critical infrastructure clients worldwide. The SkyWings account appeared in the priority client section marked with red flags that indicated contract renewal status. Authentication confirmed Marcus Williams, Chief Executive Officer, the system prompted. Executive override protocols activated. Marcus navigated to the contract management section where SkyWings' partnership agreement was displayed in comprehensive detail. Section 14.7 glowed on the screen. Material breach of values clause. Either party may terminate this agreement immediately upon documented violation of non-discrimination policies or practices that conflict with partner organization values. He'd written that clause personally 5 years ago after watching a previous client discriminate against TechFlow's minority employees during a joint project. At the time, his legal team had questioned whether it was necessary. Today, it would prove prophetic. Marcus opened a secure video conference with his executive team in Austin, knowing they'd be waiting for his decision despite the early hour in Texas. Sarah Kim, General Counsel, appeared on screen first. "Marcus, please tell me you're calling to say this was all a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Marcus replied. "I have comprehensive documentation of systematic discrimination, federal fraud, and violations of every principle our company was built on." CFO David Park joined the conference. The financial implications of terminating SkyWings are significant. $50 million in annual revenue plus potential legal costs if they challenge the termination. And the cost of continuing business with a partner that discriminates against customers who look like me, Marcus asked quietly. Park had no answer for that. CTO Jennifer Martinez brought up technical considerations. "If we terminate now, we need to execute controlled shutdown protocols. They have 48 hours of cached data before complete system failure. After that, they can't process reservations, manage flights, or maintain operations." "How long would it take them to find alternative providers?" Marcus asked. 6 months minimum, assuming anyone would take them as a client under these circumstances. More realistically, 12 to 18 months. And the cost triple their current contract if they could arrange financing. Their stock price collapse makes them a credit risk for most vendors. Marcus looked at the contract termination interface on his screen. One digital signature would cripple SkyWings' operations and cost them hundreds of millions in emergency technology replacement. It would also send an unmistakable message to every company that did business with TechFlow discrimination had consequences. Execute controlled shutdown in 12 hours, Marcus decided. That gives them time to understand the situation and respond appropriately. If they can demonstrate genuine accountability and institutional change, we can discuss emergency contract extension. And if they can't, Kim asked, then they learn what it costs to treat people like they treated me today. Marcus opened the termination interface and began entering his authorization codes. Each step was logged and time-stamped, creating an irreversible audit trail of corporate accountability. As he worked, his phone buzzed with message notifications. Elena Vasquez had published her final article of the flight titled "The $500 Million Customer Service Failure: How Discrimination Became Catastrophe." The piece was trending on every major news platform. Social media was erupting with real-time reactions to the unfolding crisis. #SkyWings discrimination had evolved beyond passenger rights activism into business school case study material. Harvard Business Review had already published analysis of how discrimination could destroy corporate partnerships. The Wall Street Journal was preparing a front-page story about technology dependency and ethical accountability. Marcus reached the final authorization screen. Contract termination requires CEO, digital signature, and biometric confirmation. This action cannot be undone. Proceed. He placed his thumb on the biometric scanner and signed his digital signature. The system processed for 30 seconds, then displayed SkyWings partnership termination authorized, shutdown protocols initiated, client notification sent. Across the Atlantic, every SkyWings executive's phone simultaneously chimed with an automated message: TechFlow Systems partnership terminated, effective immediately, per contract section 14.7 material breach of values. System shutdown begins in 12 hours. Emergency contact information attached. Marcus closed his laptop as the plane reached the gate. Around him, passengers were gathering their belongings, eager to begin their London adventures. Maria Santos was packing Sophia's supplies, the baby now calm after her successful first flight. Frank Coleman was preparing for the wheelchair assistance that would help him navigate Heathrow's terminals. "Thank you so much for your help," Maria said to Marcus as they prepared to deplane. "You made such a difficult flight manageable." "Thank you for reminding me why this matters," Marcus replied. "Safe travels." As passengers began filing off the aircraft, Marcus remained seated, finishing final documentation on his phone. He sent his legal team comprehensive evidence packages, including audio recordings, system screenshots, and witness statements. Every element needed for federal discrimination complaints was preserved and authenticated. Isabella Monroe appeared in the economy aisle, no longer wearing her flight attendant vest. She moved like someone walking to their execution, escorted by two men in suits who were clearly airline security. As she passed row 37, she stopped and looked directly at Marcus. For a moment, her polished facade cracked, completely revealing the terrified woman beneath. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Yes, you did," Marcus said quietly. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't know there would be consequences." Isabella was led away, her 15-year career ending in handcuffs and federal investigation. Tyler Brooks followed minutes later, his social media stardom replaced by fraud charges and family scandal. Marcus Williams gathered his belongings and prepared to disembark Flight 447. When he stepped onto the jet bridge, he wouldn't just be completing a journey, he would be starting a conversation about accountability that would reshape how airlines treat every passenger who dared to fly while different. The digital execution was complete. Now came the human reckoning. The jet bridge at Heathrow Terminal 5 was crowded with more than just arriving passengers. Airport security, Metropolitan Police SkyWings, corporate representatives, and media personnel had gathered to witness the conclusion of what was already being called the most expensive customer service failure in aviation history. Marcus Williams walked off Flight 447 with the same calm dignity he'd maintained throughout his 7-hour ordeal. His simple black polo and dark jeans looked exactly the same as when he'd boarded, but everything else had changed. In the span of a single flight, he'd transformed from victim to catalyst, using technology and documentation to hold discrimination accountable. Mr. Williams. A woman in an expensive suit approached, flanked by two men who were clearly lawyers. "I'm Patricia Nash, CFO of SkyWings. CEO Thornfield is standing by to speak with you personally." Marcus paused, considering the request. Through the terminal windows, he could see news vans gathering in the distance. Elena Vasquez was already being interviewed by CNN correspondents. Social media was exploding with real-time coverage of his arrival. Ms. Nash, Marcus said quietly, "Your company accused me of ticket fraud, forced me into a middle seat to accommodate someone flying free on your employee's guest pass, and allowed your crew to discriminate against me for 7 hours while I helped fellow passengers your airline was mistreating. What exactly does Mr. Thornfield want to discuss?" Nash's composure cracked slightly. "We want to make this right. Whatever it takes. What it takes is accountability. Your company enabled systematic discrimination for years, ignoring complaints and protecting employees who violated passengers' civil rights. Today wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of institutional bias. Behind them, Isabella Monroe was being led away in handcuffs by metropolitan police officers. The charges were serious federal aviation fraud, manifest falsification, and civil rights violations. Tyler Brooks followed in a separate escort, his social media career ending in criminal liability and family scandal. Mr. Williams, one of Nash's legal companions, spoke up. "We're prepared to offer comprehensive settlement, including personal compensation policy changes and partnership contract modifications." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed them Elena Vasquez's latest article, which was trending worldwide. Stock down 34%, operations, threatened federal investigation launched. "Your discrimination didn't just hurt me, it's destroying your entire company." "The contract termination," Nash asked desperately. "Already executed. You have 11 hours before system shutdown begins." The color drained from Nash's face. Without TechFlow's technology, SkyWings couldn't process bookings, manage flights, or maintain basic operations. They were facing bankruptcy within weeks unless they could find alternative providers at 3 times the cost. "Please," Nash said. "There must be something we can do." Marcus looked at the gathering crowd of passengers, media, and airline personnel. Many were recording the confrontation, documenting this final act of accountability in real time. "There is something you can do," Marcus said. "You can learn." He turned to address the crowd directly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had built a billion-dollar company on principles of equality and opportunity. "What happened today wasn't about me being rich or successful enough to fight back. It was about an industry that has normalized discrimination, that protects employees who abuse their authority, that treats passengers' civil rights as customer service suggestions." The gathering fell silent, phones and cameras capturing every word. Isabella Monroe didn't act alone. She was enabled by a system that dismissed complaints, ignored patterns of bias, and prioritized corporate protection over passenger dignity. "This won't change until discrimination has real consequences." Elena Vasquez approached with her recording equipment. "Mr. Williams, what's your message for other airlines watching this situation?" The message is simple. Technology has made accountability unavoidable. Every interaction is documented. Every bias is exposed. Every injustice spreads worldwide within minutes. Companies can no longer hide behind policies and procedures when their actions violate basic human dignity. "And your message for passengers who face similar discrimination?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "Document everything. Share your experiences. Demand accountability. And remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's prejudice, it's proven by your response to injustice." As he spoke, notifications were flooding his phone. TechFlow's stock was up 8% as investors recognized the company's principled stand. Civil rights organizations were endorsing his response. Other airline executives were announcing immediate bias training reviews. But the most meaningful message came from Maria Santos, the young mother from the flight. "Thank you for showing Sophia that standing up for what's right doesn't require anger or revenge, just courage and consistency." Marcus Williams walked through Heathrow Terminal 5, surrounded by media attention and corporate panic, but his mind was already focused on the future. This incident would reshape airline accountability, but it would also remind every company that discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was economically catastrophic. The age of consequence had arrived, delivered through cloud servers and social media, documented by journalists and witnessed by millions. SkyWings would either learn from this experience or be destroyed by it. But they would never again be able to claim that discrimination was just a customer service problem. The revolution in accountability had begun at 35,000 feet, and it was landing with the force of justice long delayed, but finally delivered. The TechFlow Foundation's inaugural scholarship ceremony took place in a gleaming auditorium at Atlanta's Clark Atlanta University, 6 months after Flight 447 became the most documented case of airline discrimination in aviation history. Marcus Williams stood at the podium looking out at 50 exceptional students who represented the future he was building, diverse, brilliant, and unshakable in their belief that technology should serve everyone equally. 6 months ago, Marcus began, "I experienced discrimination that cost one company over $500 million and changed an entire industry. But that incident also reminded me why we built TechFlow in the first place, to ensure that talent and character matter more than appearance or assumptions." In the front row sat Maria Santos Sofia, babbling happily in her arms. She'd used the settlement from SkyWings' class action lawsuit to complete her nursing degree and was now working at Atlanta Children's Hospital. Frank Coleman sat beside her, having flown from London specifically for the ceremony on Delta he'd made sure to mention with a grin. Elena Vasquez occupied the media section, her Pulitzer Prize nomination for coverage of corporate accountability prominently displayed on her press badge. Her real-time documentation of discrimination had created new standards for holding companies responsible for biased practices. Today's scholarship recipients represent something powerful, Marcus continued. They're students who understand that excellence has no color, no zip code, no predetermined path. They're future engineers, doctors, teachers, and leaders who will build a world where what happened to me becomes impossible. The scholarship program had grown beyond his original vision. Funded by the SkyWings settlement and matched by TechFlow's corporate social responsibility budget, it would support 500 students annually across 20 universities. More importantly, it had inspired similar programs at tech companies worldwide. Apple had launched their Digital Dignity Initiative. Google had created Access for All scholarships. Microsoft had established Inclusion through Innovation programs. The competitive tech industry had embraced accountability as a core business principle. But the real change was visible in aviation. The Department of Transportation had implemented mandatory bias training for all airline personnel. Federal regulations now required detailed documentation of passenger complaints and regular audits of discriminatory practices. Airlines faced automatic investigation if passenger demographics showed patterns of differential treatment. SkyWings had survived, but barely. They'd spent $200 million rebuilding their technology infrastructure after TechFlow's termination. Robert Thornfield had been replaced as CEO. Isabella Monroe had served 6 months in federal prison and been permanently banned from aviation employment. Tyler Brooks had become a cautionary tale about privilege and consequences. The airline industry had learned an expensive lesson. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong. It was financially catastrophic in the age of social media and corporate accountability. Diego Ramirez now served as SkyWings' Director of Passenger Experience, implementing policies that protected employees who reported bias and passengers who experienced it. His first act had been establishing anonymous reporting systems and mandatory investigation protocols. But the most important lesson, Marcus said, concluding his speech, isn't about corporate consequences or industry reform. It's about personal responsibility. Every interaction is a choice between lifting someone up or tearing them down. Choose wisely. You never know who has the power to change your world. The audience rose to their feet, applauding not just his words but the principle they represented. In the digital age, accountability was inevitable. Character was measurable. Dignity was non-negotiable. As Marcus left the podium, a young scholarship recipient approached Destiny Jackson, an 18-year-old computer science major, whose grandmother had been denied service at lunch counters in the 1960s. "Mr. Williams," she said, "my grandmother wanted me to thank you. She said you showed that progress isn't just about laws changing, it's about people having the courage to enforce them." Marcus smiled, thinking about his father's advice about maintaining dignity under pressure. Robert Williams had been right. Calm professionalism was more powerful than anger. Documentation was stronger than outrage. Consequences were more effective than complaints. Elena Vasquez stood in the newsroom of the Washington Post, where she now worked as senior aviation correspondent, looking at the wall where her Pulitzer Prize hung next to framed coverage of the SkyWings discrimination case. 6 months after Flight 447, she was still receiving messages from passengers sharing their own experiences with airline bias. The stories had evolved from individual complaints to institutional change. Airlines were hiring chief diversity officers. Flight attendant training programs included comprehensive anti-bias education. Passenger rights advocates were working directly with corporate executives to implement accountability measures. But the most meaningful change was personal. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Williams. "Elena wanted you to know TechFlow just signed partnership with 3 airlines that have implemented comprehensive bias prevention programs. Market incentives are working. Thank you for making accountability visible." The relationship between technology companies and airlines had fundamentally shifted. Corporate partnerships now included explicit non-discrimination clauses with real financial consequences. Companies were auditing their service providers for bias practices. Discrimination had become a business liability that no organization could afford. Elena's coverage of the Flight 447 incident had created new standards for real-time journalism and corporate accountability reporting. Journalism schools were teaching her methods as examples of how social media could be used for investigative documentation rather than just viral content. More importantly, her work had shown that individual voices could still change institutional practices when amplified through strategic communication and persistent documentation. Diego Ramirez had become a close source and friend, providing insights into how airline culture was evolving from within. Their collaboration had produced a series of articles tracking industry-wide reforms and measuring progress in passenger treatment equality. The biggest change Diego had told her during their most recent interview isn't in policies or procedures. It's in accountability. Employees know their actions are being documented and passengers know they have advocates. That changes everything. As the creator of this channel, I've spent years sharing stories of justice and accountability because I believe these narratives matter more than entertainment value. The Marcus Williams story represents something crucial about our current moment. Technology has made discrimination visible in ways that previous generations couldn't imagine. What strikes me most about this incident isn't the financial consequences, though losing $500 million in market value certainly got corporate attention, but the human dignity Marcus maintained throughout his ordeal. He could have escalated, demanded immediate recognition of his status, or used his power to humiliate his discriminators. Instead, he chose documentation over confrontation, evidence over emotion, and institutional change over personal revenge. This story teaches us that dignity isn't about wealth or status. It's about how we treat others when we think no one's watching and how we respond when we're mistreated ourselves. Isabella Monroe's downfall wasn't because she misjudged a billionaire. It was because she forgot that every passenger deserved respect regardless of their appearance or perceived social standing. The broader lesson extends beyond aviation. In every industry, in every interaction, we face choices between inclusion and exclusion, between assumption and investigation, between bias and fairness. Technology has made these choices visible and consequential in ways that should make us all more thoughtful about our actions. If this story resonates with you, share it not just for engagement, but as a reminder that accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. Every time we choose respect over prejudice, documentation over silence, and courage over comfort, we contribute to building a world where discrimination becomes not just morally unacceptable, but practically impossible. The future belongs to organizations and individuals who understand that character is measurable, dignity is non-negotiable, and justice, while sometimes delayed, is ultimately inevitable in the age of accountability. Let's build that future together, one interaction at a time.